Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that helps to get my channel promoted and kind of feeds the algorithm. I also love it if you'd leave a comment, questions or comments, suggestions for videos, how you do things are all interesting to me to hear, so let me know those kinds of things. So I think today I'm going to make some earrings. At the last show I picked up some really pretty oval Druzy quartz cabochons, and they're not just normal ones like that, but they actually were on some Chrysocolla, I think, because they ground away most of the Chrysocolla but just left a little trace of blue on the back, so it shows through. And I think they're very pretty. I'll show them to you in a second. But I was going to add some sparkle to those with some CZs and make some kind of elegant looking earrings, and we'll see how they turn out. But I'm going to have kind of a square on its side motif. Before we get started, I wanted to thank some groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are my primary group of supporters, and I really appreciate that, as well as the great community that they've formed over there. I have 3 new ones to add to that list. Lee, Laurel's Artworks, and Madeline. Thank you all for signing up for it. I look forward to getting to know you over there. And I think you'll find, like I have, that it's a really great group of people over there. So tap into their knowledge base, and I think you'll find that there's a lot of good information as well as ideas over there. So the other group is my YouTube subscribers, and we've recently passed 14,300, I think was the last benchmark. And that is awesome and unreal to me. When I started this, I did not think that I would have this many followers, and I really appreciate all of the kind comments, as well as the buy me a coffees and super thanks. Those things really help with the cost of silver right now, as it's gone up pretty high. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. With those things being said, let's get on with the video and make some earrings. This is one of my design idea books you can get on my merch store. I draw up my ideas in advance generally anymore, and I found it to be pretty useful. Here's what I drew up for today's project. These are available on my merch store, if I didn't already say that. So I did a little bit of this in advance as sort of prototyping. But I have these 2 Druzys, and like I said, they have Chrysocolla on the back. But Chrysocolla, just a little hint of blue on the back, which shows through and gives them kind of a baby blue color with a little sparkle. So I kind of like that. And we're going to put that there. And then I'll make one of these settings that I'm going to do for this in front of the camera, as well as assemble the earring, but I'm going to skip doing the bezel settings for the faceted stones. If you're interested in seeing how to do that, I have a good video about that right there, so check that out. So that's going to go there, and I'm going to put a little piece of square 18 gauge sheet up here, but I'm going to dome it first so it gives it a little kind of character. And these 2 squares I think I'm going to make out of 10 gauge square wire and just make little cubes out of them and solder them in. But the base of this is going to be a little prong setting made out of 16 gauge wire. The bottom part square, the prongs round, and then we'll clean them up at the end. And then we'll put a little 18 gauge ring on top and hook them to an ear wire. For those of you overseas who don't use gauges, 18 gauge is 1.02 millimeters, and the sheet is that, as well as the wire there. This is 3/16 fine silver bezel that I used for this bezel here, which is 4.76 millimeters, and it's in 0.41 millimeter thickness, or 26 gauge if you're here. 16 gauge, both round and square, is 1.3 millimeters. And then square wire is 2.59 millimeters on the side, I believe. So the stones themselves is about a 5 millimeter stone, and this is the Druzys are about 12 by 24s, I believe. So, all right. So to start with, I think let's make a setting for one of these guys. So. Alright, and I have a little bit of square wire from the other day. This is some 16 gauge square wire, and the first step we're going to need to do is we're going to make a little platform that's exactly the same size as the stone here, and so we're going to need to shape this into an oval and then solder it together. If you haven't been to my channel before, I use hard silver sheet solder primarily, which looks like this, and I use a flux, that's a liquid flux that I dribble on. Sometimes I'll spray it with a spray bottle too. Let's see, my torch is a Silversmith model, which is their acetylene air torch, and it's a lovely torch. I like it a lot. And I use a #1 tip, and I think that's most of the commonly asked questions that I get. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't ask questions in the comments, so I love to get questions. So let's file the end of this flat. And then I'm going to kind of hand shape this. Square wire, when you bend it, has a tendency to try and twist sideways because it's trying to find an easier way to bend. I don't know if you can see that, but it's already torquing that way. So as you do it, you need to stop and correct that. It's trying to stretch this back side and compress this inner side, so it doesn't want to do that very much. So you have to show it who's boss. Get it within range here, and then we'll cut it, and then we'll solder it, and we'll see how it looks. So we're getting close. Let's butt it up against the top side here like that. You can see how close we are there. Not too bad. So let's cut it just a little bit shy of that. We'll file it and we'll see how it looks. When I look down on it, I don't want to see the ring, or just a tiny, tiny sliver of it. And I think I might need to take just a tiny bit more off of there. So I may just file these just a skosh more. So I debated whether to put these in bezels down here. Or to prong set them. The debate was really about the amount of light getting to these stones in my head. If you bezel set them, even with an open back, it's going to cover some of the sides, and it's going to prevent some of that light getting to there and showing off that interesting blue color. And so prong setting 1 on this one. The only stipulation is I need to make sure the prongs are really laid down tight so that since it's going to be earrings, they don't catch in people's hair. So something else to think about when you're doing stuff like this. We'll see. I don't think it'll be a problem, but you know, if it is, it is, and we'll take them apart and start over at some point. That's pretty good. Okay, so let's solder that together. Make sure everything's lined up. Set it on here, cut ourselves a little bit of solder. I think these, if you did non-open back bezels for stones, these probably would be a beginner project. The way I'm doing it, it's probably more of an intermediate or an advanced because of the prongs. So there's my pick. Okay, so I do something called pick soldering too, which is a way to pick up a little bit of solder on the end of a tungsten pick. Actually, this one's a titanium pick. Some of them are tungsten. Heat the piece up to the soldering temperature and just touch it right where you want it to go. It's a real nice way to get solder exactly where you need it. But it takes a little practice, so if you're interested in learning how to do that, put a video link up there. You should check it out. It's one of those things that makes a lot of soldering operations a lot easier to me. So I think it's worth learning. Just trying to make sure everything's kind of in the same plane here. That's pretty close. So I'll just clean it up with a file and then let's put some prongs on it. That looks pretty good. So I did one in advance so that I'd have a prototype, and that allows me to mark where I'm going to put the prongs on the second one, so I don't have to eyeball it for the second one. I want them to be as, you know, similar to each other as possible. That's pretty close. So let's just mark where those go. Like I said, I'm going to use 16 gauge round wire for the prongs, and I'm going to use a magnesia block here. Sometimes it's nice, I'm going to use the edge, I think, to have something you can push your piece down into a little bit. And that's one of those things that will be useful with these kind of prongs as well, because we need them to stick straight up and down, and to keep them standing up like that sometimes it's a little easier if you have something you can push them down into a little bit. They don't need to be super long. And when I did these ones, I did them about that long, and I cut them off. So let's do something similar. I'd rather have too much than not enough. Never hurts to cut an extra one in case you mess something up. That way you don't have to guess on the size of something if you have a spare. Alright, grab a couple of needles here. I'm going to put one in. This is just a T-pin. On either end here to just kind of hold it in place while I position these other things, so it's less likely to move much. Let me straighten these out a bit. For precision's sake, sometimes I use my needle nose in order to kind of hold things and push them in. I want to do this right up against that. I don't want any gap there. For those of you right now who are going, I should get one of those. It's a magnesia block. Yeah, most jewelry places have them. Make sure those are pretty symmetrical, and I think they are. So I'm going to cut a few more smallish pieces of solder, and then we'll just attach those. The only disadvantage with magnesia blocks is that you bury part of the piece into it and it kind of insulates it from the heat, and so it makes it a little bit harder to get those pieces up to temperature. Add a little bit more to this one. Those look pretty good. Okay. Cut these off to a similar length. We'll cut them down shorter when we go to set the stone. But I'm going to cut these bottoms a little bit shorter. I may leave a little bit on there just so when I'm soldering the rest of the components together that I don't have any prongs fall off on me or anything. And I think we'll be good. But I need to make some of the other components. So I'm going to cut myself a couple of squares on an 18 gauge. I think I'm going to make them about 8 millimeters, so I'll be right back. So here's two 18 gauge 8 millimeter squares of silver, and I think I'm going to dome them a little bit. So let's grab tapping block here. Let's curve them a bit. I think that'll be nice. Probably domed enough. I might file the bottom a little bit flat though, so that they sit down nicely. So I've got these. I've got these. And I've got these pre-made bezels. I need to make those little squares of square wire, 10 gauge. Those will go right there. I'll probably flatten the corner just a little bit so it fits up nice against there. Actually, let's solder those together next. Let's get those put together. So I'm going to file one corner just a little bit flat. I think this will make it easier to get it straight up and down from the point like that if we do it like this. So let's do that. These look pretty good. By the way, when I say beginner, intermediate, advanced, it's kind of an arbitrary call by my, so don't let that cloud your judgment. It's certainly there's different gradations of what a beginner is, for instance. So someone who's never made a bezel in their life shouldn't probably try these ones. Someone who has made 50 bezels maybe could try them, I think, you know, and has enough soldering experience to really know where to heat things. So, and it never hurts to try something that's slightly above your skill level, because that's how you grow, I think, anyway. Try to push myself to do different things I haven't tried before on a regular basis anymore, because that's how I get better. The trade-off is you occasionally mess something up and don't get it to work the way you wanted it to, but usually when that happens, that's when you learn the most. Like, oh, why did that happen? And if you stop and think about it, oftentimes you'll figure it out. And then you won't have that happen again, because you know how to prevent it. Let's make some little cubes. I need 4 little cubes made out of 10 gauge square. So I think let's do it this way. I'm going to use a miter vise jig to get as good a cubes as I can. start with, I'm going to cut off some of this beveled cut. We'll line this up in here as best we can. If you don't have one of these, they're super handy for quite a few things. And if you struggle getting a flat end on a piece of wire, these are good for that. Get rid of any burrs that might be left over. I think if you want it to be square, you can use some of these kind of things. Let's tighten it down. We can use that as a gauge for how wide to make it. And there's a couple of ways you could do this. I could stick it in there and use the saw to cut it off, but I'm going to be a cheater, and I'm going to cut it off this way and then file it down to that line. So. Okay. That looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to make 3 more of those. I'll be right back. So I have everything lined up here. I have this not touching over here because those little cubes are kind of finicky. And I'm going to cut some little tiny bits of solder again, and we'll start assembling this. You can see I took and made an 18 gauge jump ring, and I cut a little piece out of it so that it has it kind of fits on either side of that square. Doesn't really matter which one we do first, I don't suppose. Again, the bigger part is where most of the heat needs to go. Now let's move this a little bit closer. A little prong trying to go AWOL on me. I don't think so, buddy. Okay, so that's kind of what I was looking at. Let's cool it off and see if everything's on there well. I think those will be pretty once they're all polished up. I'm going to pickle that and then I'll do the other one. Okay, so I got these mostly cleaned up, and I set 3 of the stones here. I was going to set this one in front of you. Like I said, on these bezel set faceted stones, there's a video about those you can check out if you follow that link. For these, I'll straighten these prongs out a little bit. I actually did the one. I set all the stones, the 2 stones on the one, while I was repickling this one, because when I was polishing this one, I actually broke the solder joint here, and so I had to resolder it. So for this, let's put him in here. So I'm just going to push these down so they're against that angle. This has got kind of a sloped up angle on it. I'm just using the flat side of my chain nose pliers. I'm going to try and gently push it down as far as I can without hopefully risking anything on the stone. And I think for these ones, I'm going to cut them right where the top of the Druzy part starts, right about there. Trying to keep them sort of even though the top of the Druzy is a little bit wavy there, so it doesn't necessarily always match up. You may not be able to see on this one, but I've already taken the Dremel and rounded these off, and then I will polish them up with the polishing cloth after I do this. I used an abrasive white wheel followed by a blue abrasive silicone wheel, which kind of smooths it out. And then I think I'll make these into French hooks, and I think we'll be done. But I like those. I like the subtle blue that shows up now against kind of the coldness of the CZ. You get a little warmth and a little cold together, sort of. And that's weird to say that about blues, but it is kind of a warm blue. So, all right, I'll get some better pictures and put them at the end. All right, well, that was the Chrysocolla and cubic zirconia earrings. I hope that you enjoyed those. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave, and consider leaving a comment. I'd also like you to take a look at my main YouTube page. I have 381 videos last time I checked, and that's because I've been putting them out at about 3 per week for almost 3 years now. So there's a lot of content here. I think there's a lot of valuable information as well as some great ideas for projects. So check out some of those videos and subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. The other thing is, make sure to hit the video description down below. There's some useful links down there. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out about that community. There's a link to where you can buy my ebook if you are interested in a guide to my 2023 videos. There's a link to my merch store if you want to get yourself some of those nice design idea books that I have available. And there's a number of other important links there too, so check those out. And make sure to come back again. I appreciate you visiting. Take care. Happy silversmithing.